Well, good morning to you all. Thank you so much for coming in on what seems to be a relaxed, rainy day. I'm hoping that means the rain is relaxing and I don't have to drive home through that. But I appreciate you being here. We'll call the meeting to order this morning of our Education Appropriations Committee. If we can find a microphone that might work. Things lining up. Speaks loudly. I'm just going to ask Will to stand up and bless the food for those of us who are eating and bless our time together. Thank you, Representative. Appreciate it. Soon to be Senator Wade. We'll keep that one title for a little bit longer here. So to you all, again, thanks for being here. Anyone who is watching at home, I hope you're in a tropical environment with some warm weather. We have a number of topics that we want to get out and cover this morning. So Sarah, if y'all want to come up and join us, and Sarah's going to educate us on everything that's related to K-12 education. She's going to start with the formation of the Department of Education. That's what you're prepared for, right, Sarah?
All right, well, thank you guys for allowing us to be here today, Chairman. I've got with me Todd Kaysen, who is our Director of Facility and Pupil Transportation, and Sarah Arroyo, who is the Director of Accountability and Finance. And we've got a presentation here. I think we'll start with capital outlay. That's okay.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you for inviting us today. Again, as Russ said, I am Todd Kaysen, the new director as of July 1. And so I want to spend a few moments with you, educating you on the capital outlay program. So capital outlay is pre-K 12 entitlement program, and the capital outlay program provides state funds, which we call entitlement funds, to our local school systems based on a 5-year FTE projections to support construction, additions of schools, renovations, and or modifications of those educational facilities. Now, those expenditures for acquisition of property, swimming pools, tracks, stadiums, and other facilities, and portions of those facilities used primarily for athletic competitions, are not a part of the capital outlay program. So athletic field houses, indoor practice facilities, and those types of things are not a part of the capital outlay program. However, some wish they would be, but they are not currently. And so, again, the capital outlay program is based on a 5-year FTE projections to support those construction projects.
If I could, just very quickly and I'm going to interject with questions.
Yes, sir.
Give me, who's determining that 5-year FTE count? Is that local? Is that an LEA?
Yes, we pull that from the annual FTE reports from school districts. And so we take those real numbers and then we project out 5 years for our local facility plan.
Great. Thanks, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The entitlement and eligible need. There was a question about entitlement and eligible need. Again, the entitlement is the maximum portion of the total statewide need that may be funded by the legislative session or legislators each year, a General Assembly each year. And so each system receives a share of that annual entitlement as a part of their capital outlay entitlement. So each year, each district receives a share of that total allotment and entitlement. The school system's share is computed by multiplying the annual entitlement authorization level by the ratio of local need to the total state need as determined by the local facility plan. So there's a formula that we use within our COPS program to determine what each district will receive that year, their portion from the total entitlement. Okay. School systems entitlement funding is earned based on the eligible need. And so that need is earned based on either the age of the facility or the FTE factor for renovations, mods, new constructions, and or additions. Although a school system may not be experiencing growth, including declining enrollment, they may qualify for funding due to the need for renovations and or modifications of a particular facility. So even though they may not be experiencing exceptional growth, a school system still will receive funding for that particular facility based on the age of that facility and or the current FTE for renovations and or modifications. Okay, questions there? Okay. There was a question that how does our state capital outlay program compare to other states? And so we reached out to the executive director for the National Facilities Organization. And so he shared with us a comparison of 5 different states. So North Carolina, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, and Arkansas. And those states are similar to Georgia in demographics and funding structures. And so as you can see in your PowerPoint, those different states have different capital outlay models. For example, equalized state share for Arkansas. So it's equalized state share. For North Carolina, a needs-based lottery. For Florida, you have a dedicated capital trust fund, PICO. For Alabama, periodic statewide bonds plus competitive grants. And of course, for Mississippi, a formula-based ADA distributions plus loan tools. So for Georgia, of course, each year, a school system receives a portion of the appropriation that is approved by the General Assembly each year added to their entitlement. So we try to explain entitlement as like a savings account each year that a school system can use for construction. And so everyone that I've talked to from the national level says that Georgia is the linchpin. Our capital outlay program is one that is most districts, most states feel that as if we are doing the right things for our boys and girls. How does the state's requirement for each system to have a facility plan prevent overbuilding of schools, at least with state money? So capital outlay funding has an eligibility factor. Entitlement earnings can only be used for state eligible projects. Systems have, again, projects are state eligible, but systems have the authority or the discretion to build above and beyond what is in their local facilities plan if they're going to use local taxpayer dollars and funds to do so. So systems have the discretion to build projects that are not eligible for state funds by using their local funds. The local facility plan is critical and key. Local facility plans should be used by districts as a planning tool to monitor the district's facility needs. So if that local facility plan is used effectively, it can help that district plan for the future and or allow them to identify those projects that have already been completed. So that tool, the facility plan, is a vital tool that districts should use and do use to ensure that their facilities are always being kept to par, kept to standard. So a project must be in a system's local facility plan to receive state funds. Local facility plans are also intended to be an implementation tool showing projects that have been completed, as I said previously. Eligible state funds cover only about 20 to 30% of total cost of projects currently. So our reimbursement is only about 20 to 30% of what the current cost, and I'll have a slide that'll show you what those current average state costs are currently and how we compare in our reimbursement. So right now it's only 20 to 30% of the cost of a project.
Is that number dictated by anything, that 20 to 30% number? Is that a rule of
It's
thumb?
just our current reimbursement rates. So when you compare the current construction cost to what we reimburse, then it's about that 20 to 30%.
But there's nothing in law or in rule that says it has to be a specific, in a specific range. So
Right.
is that up to the superintendent or DOE as a whole to determine?
Currently in our guideline that we can increase those reimbursement rates through approval, of course, but we can increase those reimbursements rate. And currently we are looking at increasing those rates or asking for those rates to be increased because of such low percentage of reimbursement. Thank you, sir. Again, a continuation of that particular question, how do states' requirement for for each system to have a local facility plan prevent overbuilding? We do have examples of systems overbuilding due to expected growth caused by economic development that did not occur. While the capital outlay program can't prevent local overbuilding decisions, the state uses the actual FTE counts when calculating funding and an eligibility factor for where funds can be used. Okay, so in real numbers, we use real numbers, real growth numbers to determine whether or not a district is eligible for those state funds, as opposed to a speculation that the school district will grow based on certain projects may be coming to that particular area. Yes, sir.
I think you can hear me. I don't know if this is working. Okay, thank you very much. So I just want to get clarification. So one of the school systems in my district is Dawson County. It's my home, and we've seen recent growth. And I was communicating with our superintendent recently, and just to give some flavor, our March FTE was 4,397, but the actual enrollment was 4,413. The October of 25 FTE was sitting still at that same 4,317. Well, actually dropped to 4,317, but our actual enrollment today is 4,600. So my question is, do you think we need to update, or would it benefit systems and the state as a whole if we had a more accurate way to determine the actual enrollment? And that could go for both systems that are in high growth situations like Dawson, or even in situations in which you may see a system that is seeing shrinkage. I just want to know if you think that the FTE, the way we currently do it, is actually, for lack of a better term, the best way for us to determine enrollment as it relates to capital outlay, especially. Does that make sense?
Good question. Yes, sir.
That's an 8% differential basically in my community. So I mean,
Yes, sir.
We're
Yes,
undercounted by 8%.
Of course, the FTE uses a formula to determine that FTE that's reported, October and March counts. I would think most superintendents would say if they see a discrepancy that it would be a good idea to review that formula. As a former superintendent, there were times when I say, well, that doesn't seem to align with my current enrollment. So I'll have to dig a little bit deeper for you, get back with you on that. But I do think if there is a discrepancy, then you would have superintendents to say, hey, is it an opportunity for us to review that as a possibility? What we use now, of course, are those numbers that are reported through, and that's all we really have to use. But there are times when, because of the formula, how it is calculated, there may be a discrepancy between the FTE number and the actual student enrollment count. So,
is there an opportunity for that discussion to occur where the superintendent can provide to DOE, hey, this is what our FTE count is. However, here's our actual enrollment. And do you have the authority on your own to give that consideration? Or is it just a hard and fast, we appreciate that information, we have to use FTE?
Currently, I don't have that authority to make an adjustment to those numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
FTE collection.
Sure.
I believe the FTE collection dates are in law
Okay, yeah.
as to when we can actually do the collections. So
Yes.
both the October and the March dates.
Actual date, or is it just sometime in the month of March and sometime in the month of
The first 2 weeks is when we get those counts, and then I think March 4th or October 4th, and then the first couple of weeks in March.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. I'm
Mr.
trying to
Chair,
remember based on my time as school superintendent, so if I'm not quite accurate.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir. Mhm.
Mr. Chairman,
All right, let's see, that question has been answered. All right, I have an overview of the existing needs statewide. What is the demand in the next 3 to 5 years for new school buildings versus state formula earnings to maintain existing space? So what we try to do here is provide our current need as of October 25th and also show you what we have in our current local facility plans as far as those projects that are in those local facility plans. So the current statewide eligible need as of October 25th is $3,345,701,648 within all of the facility plans that we have. Now, within those needs, we have additions, new constructions, renovations, and modifications. So if you look at your PowerPoint, you'll see additions. We have 1,150 instructional units, which equates to 560 schools. So there are within the local facility plans, we have school districts that are proposing to have addition projects for 560 schools. And we pull that from our local facility plans. For new construction, there are 967 IUs, which equates to 59 schools. So we have districts are planning to build 59 new schools statewide. That's in our current facility. Now that construction could be next year or 5 years from now because it's a 5-year plan. So they plan out 5 years. So that's not an immediate construction. So it could be 5 years from now. The renovations are 66,848 IUs, which equates to 2,092 schools. Renovations, which would be painting, flooring, lighting, windows, and those types of renovation projects. And then the modification projects are 1,850 schools, which includes replacements of roofs, HVAC, kitchen equipment, bus, car rider canopies, and building modernizations. So within our current 5-year plan, these are the projects that we have listed in those plans currently. But again, it is a 5-year projection, so it's not an immediate project that could be happening this year, but some could be.
How do these numbers look, as we're looking forward for 5 years? How does it look, maybe looking in arrears 5 to 10 years? I mean, are we seeing an uptick, about an average?
No,
Generally speaking.
it's about an average.
Right.
At one time, there was exceptional growth in Gwinnett County and other districts like that. So you would see more new schools, but has seemed to have leveled off some. But overall, it's about an average of what we've seen in the previous years.
I want to go back to Representative Wade's question about, some of those fast growth systems.
Yes, sir.
I think we see a lot of those in Metro Atlanta. And that's not taking away from any systems that aren't growing or maybe even in losing, but how do we stay ahead, be ahead, whatever phrase you want to use on those fast growth systems? How can we do more for them, push harder, et cetera?
If the growth is actual FTE growth, then within our COPS program, we take account of that because their FTE is increasing. If the FTE increases, of course, then they can earn more funding for new schools and other situations like that. At one time, and I can't remember the actual year, that there was a formula for exceptional growth, but that money was rolled into the general capital outlay program. So now we don't have that special appropriation for exceptional growth anymore. But because of FTE growth, if a system is growing and then we project out and we see those real numbers in our FTE projection, because we project out each year. So everything starts over each year as we roll up our new facility plans. So if those districts are growing and those numbers indicate that, then they can earn funding for that growth.
Did that exceptional growth designation go away due to change in law, or was that just an expiration of that?
I think it's sunsetted at that particular time.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Yep. Question. Does the state have a database on the number of facilities that school systems own that are former schools that are no longer in operation, but still owned? I'm just curious if we have any idea of those that are out there.
Do we have that database? And Sarah, that's my assistant director, Ms. Sarah Mars. Is that data? FSR.
Okay. What is FSR, just for?
Facilities Schools Registry.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
so we do have that information.
sir.
I don't need it now. I'd like to think it'd be beneficial for committee members to be
Okay.
aware of that report, if that's something you can
We'll go
provide.
ahead.
Thank you.
One more question, Chairman Jones.
Just a curiosity question. Do we have any way for the districts to take advantage of some state level type negotiation strength around warranty of roofs, warranty of HVAC, et cetera? Because when I see that we're moving projects into 1,856 and then we're renovating 66,000 IUs at 2,000 schools, it at least begs the question in terms of looking backwards 10, 20 years, which HVAC systems are working for us, which roofs are working for us, which contractors are doing the best job. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, the question is we don't want necessarily Gwinnett, you've used Gwinnett before, building when we have realized that certain parts, certain contractors down in, say, Ware County didn't produce for the state. Because at the end of the day, this is one pool of money. Do we have any data on that?
A new roof, it has to be warranted for 20 years. And of course, once that 20 years has expired, then that district can begin to earn new entitlement funding for a new roof for that particular facility. HVAC is 10 years, kitchen equipment is 15, so on and so forth. So there are dates that will expire, and then that district can earn funding for that particular project once they receive funding for the first time. But we do have in our COPS program a way to kind of track that and keep up with that in COPS. And so I can get that for you if you need that. Yes, sir. Okay. Yes, sir. Sir. Any other questions? Okay. Yes, sir. What facility management strategies does the department have for school systems with a declining student population? And we've kind of touched on this a little bit already. The capital outlay program offers opportunities for funding through the consolidation of, well, we didn't touch on this, the consolidation of schools within a district. So our current guidelines say that if a district has 2 or more schools and they want to consolidate and build one, basically phase out 2 schools and then apply for funding for a brand new school, then within our guidelines, we take account of that. And so districts can earn funding for that new school if they phase out 2 or more current facilities. And those facilities have to be at least 35 years old for them to consolidate and phase out and earn low wealth funding. Ultimately, it is a system level decision to utilize this route. So we have consultants, and those consultants help districts determine those best avenues for their new projects. But ultimately, it's a local decision, a local district decision if they want to phase out and consolidate.
I want to be very respectful of our systems that, as you put here, may have declining enrollment, may have declining population, may not be seeing that growth. I'm certainly not implying with my next question that we take funding away from them.
Mhm.
But to your point here, they may qualify for funding due to the need for renovations and modifications.
Yes, sir.
Is that formulaic in nature? Is there a formula that determines, declining growth where we say, if we see this trend line, then we're not going to be there to support a new building, but we may be there to support modifications or renovations, or is that more human element?
No, it's within our COPS program. It's within that program, that software that we use, we call COPS. It's within that program that helps helps that school district identify what that funding amount could be for a particular project or a renovation or mod. If they have declining enrollment, they still earn based on the age of that roof or that HVAC system. If that expiration date ends, then they can still now begin to earn entitlement funding again for that particular school. So it's within that COPS software where we can make those numbers and give districts a good projection of what type of state funds they would earn, whether it's for growth or their FTE has kind of plateaued, or even if their FTE has declined. So it's all built within to that COPS program that helps us help districts determine what funding they can earn.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Did I answer your questions? Yes, sir. Okay, again, all those school systems may be experiencing growth. This statement was just, we pulled it from another slide, including declining enrollment. They still may qualify for funding due to the need for renovations mods for existing buildings. What facility management strategies does the department have for school systems that are experiencing we've talked about this before, We do not currently have an additional funding for exceptional growth, which I mentioned earlier. However, the capital outlay funding is always offered based on an actual FTE numbers. The average growth from a past 5-year FTE counts is used to calculate the future 5 years projection that is used in the funding calculation. So it's all built into a formula that helps us determine what that projected growth would be. Now, that growth could be more, could be less based on actual numbers that we pull each year. Again, we talked about this before. There are examples of systems overbuilding due to expected growth caused by economic development that did not occur. However, while the capital outlay program can prevent local overbuilding decisions, the state uses the actual FTE counts, which we've basically said that previously.
So to that point, I certainly don't want to speak for my peers sitting up here or for the committee, but in your second bullet point there, no, I don't think that we would support overbuilding as well. And that, I think that is of concern to me and prospectively taxpayers of the state of Georgia.
Yes, sir.
Do you guys as DOE have any plans, any protocols, any resources in place that will help to support this concept of overbuilding for those schools, those systems that maybe get in that predicament?
We really don't have authority to stop a district, but it's all local decisions. However, the consultants that we have, the 5 consultants, try to help them understand the do's and don'ts, what could be done, what should not be done based on state funds and how we can participate. But again, ultimately, it's the local district decision as to if they want to build more than what they are actually eligible for. And so we have conversations with them. But again, if the superintendent and the board decides to do more than what they're eligible for with state funds, they have that discretion to do so.
With,
Yes.
hi.
Right. If they overbuild, thank you, Russ. If they overbuild, then it gives them a surplus of IUs. And so in the future, if they want to use or they need state funds to build something else, but because they've overbuilt, then they may not get state funds or as much of state participation because they overbuilt, because they have what we call a surplus in IUs. So everything they have to really plan carefully to ensure that they don't somewhat hurt themselves if they do overbuild, because it will give them a surplus of IUs, because we use those IUs to determine, we use FTE numbers to determine what they earn in instructional units. So if they're eligible for 1 school, but they build 2, now they've got a surplus of instructional units. So 5 years later or 10 years later, they may not earn more IUs because they already have a surplus.
But that's still their decision.
That's still their discretion to do
right.
so. Yes.
So they could make that choice without DOE oversight.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir. The state recently adjusted the entitlement earnings, and again, thank you all for doing that for us, approving the increase in our entitlement funding. Can you demonstrate the average cost? And this is what I talked about a little bit earlier, using the 2025 RS means, which is North America's leading construction estimate database. The average construction cost per square foot for a specific grade organization, new facilities versus the current state reimbursement costs are as follows. For a new elementary facility, Georgia RS means average is $337 a square foot to build a new elementary school on average.
And
We
the
reimburse $80 a square foot. That's where that 20-30% range comes from. For a new middle school,
I'm doing fine.
$4.35.
The Zoom meeting.
Reimbursement is $82 for a new high school,
Okay.
$347.
I
State
didn't hear
reimbursement is $84 a square foot. So we are looking at those numbers, and we'll be asking for an increase to get more in line to a 40% reimbursement rate as opposed to 20 to 30%.
Can you expound on that, please? Why moving to 40%? Why those would be, why the legislature would be asked for those additional dollars?
what we've found in the previous years is that districts are having to use more local funds to construct. And so since 2012, those reimbursement rates have not been increased. And so the funding is there. What we based on our guidelines and rules, we have the discretion to, as a department, to adjust that because the funding is already included in the funds that we receive each year. And so the reimbursement for like entitlement funds, those funds are there for each district to receive. And then as a district makes application, then those funds are already included in the budget once those applications are approved. So it really would not increase a dollar amount that we ask for. It would just be added into what we already receive. If I'm making sense of that.
Are the local school districts asking for that, or are you guys offering that?
No, we're trying to offer that to the districts because we do have districts that are in need of more state participation. And so we're offering that possibility to increase those rates as a way to help school districts. And we would not have to ask for more appropriation to increase those rates because those funds are already included in the annual funding that we receive.
Okay.
I can get more explanation for that later. Sarah Morris is a finance person, and so she can help us with that to get more clarity on what that would look like for when we begin to ask for those numbers.
Okay.
Please. Thank you, sir. I appreciate the discussion. I know that a vast majority of schools are utilizing SPLOST dollars to build schools.
Yes, sir.
Do you know how many systems in Georgia, especially those that may be using a higher dollar amount of what you presented here, that are building new schools or even remodeling or making small additions to that are not using SPLOST dollars?
I don't have that information, but we can do some research to try to get that. But let me just start with that answer.
My assumption is it's few, but I'd like
Yeah.
to know if there are some.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Get that information.
Yeah, and if I could, just while we're on,
Sure.
while we're on that topic, if we could get a list of the school systems, and Sarah, I know 3.5 years ago when I walked in this role, you gave me that list, and I remember seeing it, not really understanding what all the numbers meant. But if we could also see by school district, however that data parallels, if it's last 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever y'all have available, of who's received entitlement dollars,
Yes, sir.
and outlay dollars that we've talked about before. If I remember correctly, Sarah, weren't those two in the same? They were, or maybe it was just outlay dollars. I don't remember.
It may have just been capital outlay
But
dollars.
maybe, anyway, you'll know, we'll
We'll
look
get
it
that
up.
for
But
you.
I just, to Floor Leader Wade's point there, I'd like to see kind of where those dollars are, where they're spending, who's using SPLOST, who's not, just to get an understanding of kind of utilization and uptick if.
So we can get that information. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, please continue.
Okay, thank you. Last couple of questions. Of the current funding system favor building new buildings over taking care of aging buildings? This is our opinion, and based on what we see through our capital outlay and the projects that we've seen, the answer would be no. We have a funding option for modernization. So if a facility is 40 years old, a district can receive additional funds to basically bring that building to new, basically to what we would call to be a new building based on the current standards. And of course, that modernization again is given to them by way of formula that's in our COPS program. So that's basically the short of that particular question. Again, do aging buildings present more issues for school safety perspective? Retrofitting can sometimes be more costly. Past building designs may present safety issues as well. We reached out to the current safety department and asked some questions about that. And of course, retrofitting an older building definitely would cost more to make it more safer for students than a brand new building based on what we've seen and based on the conversation that we've had with with him. And lastly, what improvement adjustments could be made to the state's pre-K-12 capital outlay program? Our software, you've heard me mention COPS several times. Our software is over 10 years old. And of course, like any technology, the older it is, the more problems you can have with it. And so we've seen some malfunctions that have been causing us problems with our local facility plans, with our applications, that could impact how we fund reimbursements. We may overfund, we may underfund based on COPS being 10 years old. So if there is a need, it would be a need to receive funding to upgrade our COPS program.
Chairman Jones.
Real quick question. Is something like that coming off the shelf, or is that something that needs to be custom built?
It will be custom built.
Okay, you have a range of what the expenditure would be?
Yeah, it was right now about $2 million, a little over $2 million is the last quote that we received from our IT department.
Okay, and did IT happen to put together any type of business case to be able to justify spend 2, save 5 or anything like that?
Yes, we did IT put together a proposal that we received that we can definitely share with you.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for the chairman, but a copy of that.
I think the whole committee can.
No, we have not that we could share with you on it later.
Sure,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, sir.
if we could see that and certainly understand, hearing you say that this program, we probably all use Microsoft Word in here on a daily basis, and that program goes back 35 years and it works just fine.
Mhm.
I understand exactly what you're saying with aging software, but I think in addition to the cost and to Chairman Jones' point, we'd like to see some commentary on exactly why a piece of software that's 10 years old may, as you put it here, and as you mentioned, may have some inaccuracies, may produce numbers that are not, I'm not questioning you guys at all.
Sure.
I mean, good Lord, this building goes back to the 1880s and some things function just fine. And
Sure.
there's other things that don't. So
Sure.
I'm not speaking for Chairman Jones either, but I'm sure his line of questioning would probably also follow in, tell us what's broken and why we need to fix it.
Yes, sir.
Not just the cost.
Yes, sir.
If that's a fair request.
It's fair.
Chairman Jones, anything else? Thank you, sir.
Yes,
Wade.
Just to clarify, so curious about other large states with large numbers of counties. Do we know what software systems that those states use, just kind of from a best practices? Not questioning your IT team.
Sure.
I work in the banking industry and we're always having that battle of compliance
Sure.
with federal law and
Yes, sir.
just the competition there and having accuracy. But I would assume that there are other states that have faced the similar situations. Is there any opportunity to cooperate to understand what they're doing and if their system is maybe not necessarily, as you said, off the shelf, but something that could be utilized and then customized to fit Georgia? Texas comes to mind based on the number of counties.
Yes, sir. I don't know that, but we can definitely reach out to our national organization to get more information about what other states are using.
Any other questions from the committee? Chairman Dickey.
This is probably more of a question to our staff and committee. Do we know how many systems utilize eSplash and how many systems do not? And does that have a correlation in the highest local systems are able to do their portion of the construction building?
Chairman Dickey, according to the commentary from the back of the room here, all counties, almost certain, only one does not have an eSplost, and that would be Burke County.
Okay.
Just the information I was passed along,
Okay.
but
Happy to
get more for you. And Mr. Cardoza, that might be one just to add, just to confirm, and in the list of things we'd like to see, if maybe you could confirm who has eSplost, who doesn't, or maybe, I think Chairman Jones mentioned this earlier, who may have an expiring inside this 5 year, maybe that's a good look. Whatever data you have available, yes, if you could just kind of give us an idea of it passed on the 24 ballot and it's good until, you know what I mean? Is that, okay, I see lots of head nodding. Chairman Dickey will get that information. I'd like to see that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all for inviting me to speak with you today. I'm going to turn the mic over to Ms. Sarah Rohr.
Good afternoon. So the department was asked to provide some information on school nutrition, specifically lunchroom worker pay raises, completion schools, and federal funds. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. So the school nutrition formula, the calculated earnings in fiscal year 2026 was $33.2 million. This formula is codified. It's in OCGA 22-187, and code actually sets requirements for a lunchroom worker salary allotment and a manager supplement. And even though that is outlined in code, I wanted to quote this piece that's also in code, which is the overarching reason for the school nutrition program. Any state funds appropriated for this purpose shall be used to supplement federal funds as a means of keeping sale prices within reach of paying students and maximize participation in quality meals for all students. And then I also wanted to point out that unlike other education-related funding, school nutrition programs operate as businesses with the federal USDA reimbursement funds that they receive for free and reduced price breakfast and lunch. The state calculated formula earnings that we're going to talk about a little bit more, and also the cost that paying students provide into the program. So these are the components of the school nutrition formula. The salary allotment is the largest component, and this is in law, and it states that there is a floor that the state must provide for a lunchroom worker salary, which is $161 a month or $1,932 a year. At this point in time, we are providing more funding than the floor that is required in code at $2,586 per lunchroom worker. So that total amount of the formula piece, like I said, is the bulk at $31.3 million. So next is a manager supplement, and that is calculated at $400 per manager. And that is less than the ceiling in code for a supplement for managers, which is $100 a month or $1,200 annually. And that makes up about $874,000. And then lastly, sick leave is funded for managers and non-managers, 2 sick days each. $58 is provided for managers and $37 is provided for non-managers. So that makes up the formula. That makes up the $33.2 million that I had mentioned on the previous slide. The last piece that I wanted to mention, because this is included under the school nutrition budget under the Department of Education, is $6.3 million for the reduced paying student that the state began funding in fiscal year 2025. So I just wanted to make note of that, but that is not a part of the formula. So the specific question that was asked had to do with pay raises for lunchroom workers. So now that I laid out the pieces of the formula, you can see that the state is providing $2,586 per lunchroom worker. That is the state allotment. So any pay raise calculated at the state level is based on that state allotment. So for example, I have an average lunchroom worker salary for Cobb County, and it's $19,225. So you can see that the majority of the salary is paid for by the system or the school lunch program, and there is a smaller state allotment there. And when we calculate, say, a 5% pay raise on that state allotment, it comes out to $129. And if you look at that for the overall total salary, it only comes out to 8.67% salary increase. Any remaining funds that are provided to school systems for pay raises that aren't given or passed along to lunchroom workers, which I would say almost in every case is, because we're only funding a small portion of the salary, is kept within the school lunch program. And then the last point I wanted to make, and this is in code, is that systems are to create salary schedules for their school lunchroom workers and receive periodic step increases.
Sarah, could I
Yes.
ask a couple of questions, please? I really want to start with your middle bullet point there. Any remaining funds that aren't, as I recall that you just said, if a raise was approved and appropriated for, and it's not completely used for those individual workers, that the dollars would not go to that district's general budget, but they would be forced to be used within the school lunch program?
That's what we have been, yes, that's what we have been told by our school nutrition team.
And could you explain what it means specifically to support the school lunch program? I mean, does that go to buy more trays? Does that go to buy sneeze guards?
Yes.
Or you know what I mean?
So it kind of offsets, the school lunch programs are kind of like, as she said, run like a business. So they've got their income from the school meals that they serve, that they get reimbursed from the federal government. They've got the revenues collected from students that are
Yes.
paying for some of the meals that are kept at a certain cost, and then the state fund. And that basically runs the entire program. And most programs, I would say, most programs do not borrow from their general fund. However, that is a local decision. If they want to subsidize part of their nutrition program and have more expensive meals or, better nutritious, things like that. But so most of them run as a business, so it all stays within that pot. So it would go for meal costs, it'd go for salaries for nutrition workers, it'd go for kitchen equipment, anything you could think of that would basically help run the school nutrition program.
If I could be direct in my follow-up question. If the legislature appropriates money specifically for a salary increase for lunchroom workers, do you see a problem with a school district not choosing to expend those dollars accordingly and provide those raises?
I think, in my experience, most do give the raise as appropriated by the General Assembly. I think one of the questions that kind of comes up with us is, if, as this slide shows, a 5% salary increase mandated in the Appropriation Act for a nutrition worker, we're only funding 0.67% of that actual raise. So for a local district to give a 5% raise to a nutrition worker, it has to be able to be encompassed into that pot of money that I state, as most of them don't utilize general fund dollars. So they've got to find money, whether it's through reimbursement or collecting from the actual students paying. They've got to find another way to fund the other 4.33% of the raise. So that's where it gets sticky, whether or not we mandate a raise for a local district that we're not completely funding. That makes,
I understand, and I think our challenge becomes when constituents call and say, you told us
we're getting a 5%.
that you approved and appropriated, specifically this committee appropriated a raise, yet I'm looking at my pay stub and someone's not telling me the complete truth here.
Mhm.
And so I specifically ask about this because it is coming up. And I want to be able to go home and want my peers to be able to go home and give an accurate answer. And if that is saying we funded the state portion of your raise, you need to talk to your superintendent about it. If that's the appropriate response, then that's fine. I want that to be the appropriate response. They're elected just like we are by the people, but I want to be able to give them the right answer, which may not be the state funded your pay raise. So I hope you understand where I'm coming
Yes,
from
sir.
with my line.
And I think that was an accurate statement, what you just said, that it's
Okay.
state funded, and it is a local decision whether or not they want to fund the remaining percentage.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for letting me interrupt, Sarah.
Yes. Any other questions on school nutrition before I move on?
Seeing none.
Okay, so completion schools. So completion schools were created in House Bill 87, which passed the General Assembly in 2023. They're non-traditional high schools that offer educational opportunities for students, including credit recovery, dropout prevention, and evening and weekend hours. Completion schools have two different types of students. And the first are LEA students. So completion schools are authorized by the State Board of Education, making them local education agencies. So they therefore receive QBE funds for those students. LEA students are students that are 18 years and older. And then there's program students, and program students are 16 to 18 years old. They remain in their local school system, but they do go to the completion school for instructional opportunities, and that happens between the school system and the completion school through a memorandum of understanding. So the first three schools, Mountain Ed, Foothills, and Coastal Plains, they became completion schools after House Bill 87 was passed, and they were formerly state charter schools. And Discovery Regional High School, they became a completion school last school year. So their first year in operation was the 24-25 school year. And then coming up, the fifth completion school that will be opening during the 26-27 school year. After that, there has not been a chosen region for the next opening. Any questions about that? Okay, so the department was specifically asked about Southern Rivers, which is the completion school that is set to open during the 26-27 school year. $2 million in funds were appropriated by the General Assembly in the 26 budget for planning purposes for the school to open. So I have listed here some of the budget categories in where they plan to expend those funds. You can see that the greatest amount is instructional salaries. That will likely happen, the expenditure of those funds, more towards the end of the fiscal year, probably in the last quarter or two as they're starting to hire and train teachers. And then, as you can see, they have other just expenses such as general administration, maintenance, pupil services, and then I kind of rolled some of the other ones up together. But I did provide to Andrew, and I'm happy if he wants to share it with the committee, a more detailed budget for Southern Rivers, so you can see exactly how they plan on expending their funds. But as of right now, they are still in a planning period. They're working with school systems on obtaining those memorandums of understanding to be able to have access in other parts of their region.
Sarah, if I could,
Yes.
do we have a facility identified?
Yes, I believe the facility is in Schley County, and it's at I believe it's at the Schley County, like their Board of Education office, as far as like where they're set up, like their office. And then I think Schley County Schools may be one of the identified sites.
Sure. So that leads to my question. I'm not trying to nitpick on dollars, but maintenance dollars that are in here, is that kind of a standard calculation based on a percentage? Is that, hey, we know that we have that building right there and we know
Yes.
that it needs,
Yes.
could you speak to that, please?
Yes. So the way that it was explained to me is that every site is different, and the infrastructure upgrades and the technology upgrades for each site is going to be dependent on the site and what needs to be done to make the site school ready. It's on my next slide, but I can talk about it now. One of the needs that the completion schools have stated is site expansion, and they've said even to open up a small site, it could cost $1 million. Now, that's not all upgrade and technology. That's not all infrastructure and technology upgrade costs. That does include, some of the initial instruction before QBE dollars roll in, but it is very specific to the site on what is needed. So they're working right now, and they're at a point where they know that they'll need more for site expansion, but they haven't really identified specifically what it is. For some of the infrastructure upgrades, because I think right now they're looking at 4 or 5 different sites, they do have some, they've requested some costs, but they don't have it yet coming back in on what exactly it would cost for a few of those sites.
And so if I could, last question, as you put, any additional dollars will be used in identifying new sites and providing upgrades. I
Yes.
get the upgrades. I hear you, not
Mhm.
questioning that, but from a timing standpoint, it pains me to say how soon we will be back in this building day in and day out. But could you talk, if you know what that identification of new sites might be? Would this be an ask in the prospective amended budget? Is this a big budget ask? Is this not even in the upcoming legislative session ask? Just not holding you to anything, but generally speaking,
So when we've reached out to this like our team that works with completion schools and specifically this school, they've used Discovery Regional High School as the benchmark. So I believe $5 million in ESSER funds was what their pre-planning amount was. I think a portion of that, like 3.4 million, is what they actually used in their pre-planning year to get up, and that was 6 sites. So when we talk to our team who works with Southern Rivers, they want to use that as a target. So in order to get Southern Rivers into 6 sites, just like Discovery Regional High School, they're thinking it would be that same 3.4 million and maybe just like an inflationary cost of like 6% or something like that. I think we maybe identified like $3.6 million if we were going to stay in line. So, and that may be too, having Discovery as the blueprint may be, may provide that good roadmap too, because of what they were able to accomplish. Now, each school system is different. And that's what I think a lot of, working with the school systems to get in there is why there is so much uncertainty. And, they're still like working through that process, and they're just in this period of pre-planning. So. Okay, so reported additional needs, that was one of the questions that you had asked as well. So one of them that we had heard from the schools was operations funding. So as I had mentioned, so the completion schools are LEA, so they do receive QBE funds. I have been told the majority of students that are in completion schools are LEA students, not program students. So the completion school is earning those QBE dollars for those students. And then there's an additional grant for completion schools that if the student category that was counted is less than the student category calls for alternative education, that would be then brought up to the alternative education student category cost, kind of what we did with Mountain Ed prior to 2021. So another thing that they reported to is that they just had wanted to state was completion schools don't receive the state charter school supplement and they don't receive local funds. And then lastly, site expansion, which I had talked about. And that's all I have for completion schools, unless there's any questions. Okay. The next are federal funds. So in fiscal year 26, $1.2 billion in federal allocations have been sent to school systems. That includes $810 million in title funds and $379 million in IDEA funds. These funds are targeted to provide assistance to students in need. Title I, which is the largest federal title program, supports 1.3 million economically disadvantaged students. And then also there are other title programs, as I know you are all aware, for after school programs, English language learners or migrant students. And then, like I said, our special ed federal funding is IDEA, and that's providing resources to 237 students in the state with disabilities. And this doesn't include, so these are our federal fund awards that we have received for 26, but it doesn't include the USDA reimbursement that we receive for the free and reduced price lunch program, which has been historically just over $1 billion per year. And then the department's response to the potential loss of federal funds. So earlier this year, there was a reorganization of federal staff to position the department better for any potential federal fund reductions. just continued monitoring proposed budgets at the federal level. And then just as we always do, continue to allocate, oversee, and provide support to school systems receiving federal funds.
So Sarah, is there anything that the state needs to look at funding that the federal government has stopped funding at this time?
So as of right now, these awards for fiscal year 26 are in line with what the state has received in prior years. So there's not a gap that I've been made aware of. And I don't think there is. I think this encompasses, everything. So as of right now for fiscal year 26, we're getting what we've traditionally gotten from the federal government.
Yeah, we're getting the funds. They may not have the staff up there, but we have access to our draws.
Is there any reason, again, as we reconvene in this building in the near future, is there any reason to, at this point that you're aware of, to be concerned about FY27 federal funding that could impact us as appropriators here as it relates to what we're talking about?
Yeah, we haven't really heard of any scenarios where we're getting less funds yet. I mean, there's been some proposals, which is kind of why we worked on a reorganization of federal funds, which is, some of the discussions were around possibly combining some of the title programs into, more block type grants within. And that's kind of how we focused we kind of went out and did some analysis of what other states had in each title program and went through and reorganized our department to be better situated for any kind of changes like that. So I think we're uniquely positioned to be able to sustain any kind of changes like that. However, if there was a dramatic change in funding, that could all change
All bets are off.
pretty quick. Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Okay. Thank you. Other questions? Seeing none.
That was all I had.
Okay. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
I think we have our friends from GOSA who are going to come up and speak to us next. I'll let Patrick get everything situated for us there.
Yeah, we do have a few handouts. You want to go ahead and pass those out? While Stacy is passing those out, I'll introduce her. I brought a couple of the org chart with me. Stacy Lutz is our coaching coordinator for our Literacy Council work, and then Jackie Lundberg is our Chief Operating and Data Officer. I'm Fran Dundor and was formerly with GOSA. Representative Dickey and I reminisced about a lunch we had when I was over the Governor's Honors Program, and am coming to you this morning in a different role. And so thank you for inviting us and having us.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you all so much for being here. We appreciate your time.
We're glad to be. You asked us specifically to address 3 questions. One of them was an updated copy of our org chart with leadership outlined and lines drawn to see that delineation. And I have that for you. We'll start there. You also asked us for the scope of work and deliverables for our engagement with the Deal Center and any processes and metrics that will apply to that. And Stacy will speak to those as well. And then the last question, how much of our literacy related budget goes towards coaching versus administrative and contractor costs? So we will address all of those today. And if we don't, ask us more questions. All right, let's start with the org chart, and you have this in front of you. This is the big picture at a glance of GOSA's our current staffed team. And some of these positions, as you can see, are currently vacant, and we are working to specifically beef up our policy research and evaluation team. And I'll speak a little bit more to that as I go through this. So we'll start with operations and data, which is led by Jackie Lundberg and has been led extraordinarily by Jackie. The scope of work, I thought it might be beneficial for you to have both the scope of work as well as any statutory requirements that align with the work we're doing at GOSA. That has helped me in my role being new. Georgia Awards, I could have had 3 slides about just Georgia Awards and what they produce. They are coveted, I think, across the state for the data that we collect and the way that we collaborate with so many of our state partners, the DOE being among them, to share that data with researchers and to learn as much as we can about how to support achievement in our state. Jackie also works with our business operations within the GOSA office proper, any IT or security liaisons, as well as data and analytics. Any questions so far? Policy research and evaluation. Last week was a team of 2, is now a team of 3. And so we are currently working to staff with talented analysts. But if you take a look there at the scope of work, you see that statutorily we are required, this particular portion of our team is required to produce quite a lot of forward-facing, public-facing reports. And so as we work to hire for vacant positions and evaluate the work this group does, we'll continue to evaluate our needs there. We also have school services. The director of school services is currently standing before you as the executive director of the Governor's Office of Student Achievement. But we have a program manager, 2 project managers, and we hire seasonal staff. This is where GHP is primarily housed and run. It is also was also work that comes out of this office, which will make sense to you in a moment. There were assessment audits that were done out of are currently housed here. We are working to move those over cleanly to policy and research, which is where, when we are fully staffed there, it makes more sense for them to be. But because when I was brought on board, I had that experience being in public school and working with audits for several years, was tasked with doing that as well. So we were sharing the love, working with all the resources we have. Any questions so far? And then we have our Georgia School Leadership Academy, GSLA. We have a director over these, an assistant director over program managers who run what has essentially been a coaching program, leadership coaching and program. It did not lead to endorsements, but it did lead to opportunities. And we are currently supporting 6 districts in the state with this team who are doing on-site coaching, developmental coaching, and just an outline of what that work looks like there.
Could you speak to roughly the size of those districts, who's being coached, what we're coaching on?
Sure can. Yeah. And I won't remember all of them. So be patient with me. I know we're working in Columbia. Stacy will tell us. Wheeler, Muskogee, Griffin Spalding. So those are the counties those types of counties that we're supporting. They are working, every county has a different approach. So the evolution of GSLA is something that we've been watching as we have other partners who do coaching and district support. We want to make sure that we are in line with what the state needs and what our educators need. Currently, the coaching is at the district level with district teams on organizational effectiveness, on best practices and processes around education. It is a varied approach. It is not a streamlined approach, and it isn't tied in currently with our literacy work.
How were those 6 districts chosen? Have they been in the pipeline? Is this kind of a rotating?
Yeah, they applied.
And is 6, generally speaking, about the average number per engagement?
That's a change in structure.
Yeah, so over the past 12 months or so, the structure of GSLA has changed, where we went from 3 coaching models specifically to, and Stacy actually will ask you to come up and speak to that. Stacy worked in this in a prior life at GOSA, where we had 3 strands. We reorganized because we saw duplicity there with other work, and that organization was then to have a more district level approach. If you don't mind.
Please, by all means.
Certainly. And so at that point, we looked at it more of a statewide cohort system so that we could incorporate not only best practices for certain groups, but that those groups could then share those information and practices across the state rather than focusing on a single district. Sometimes we found that single districts become myopic when we only look at what we do. So that cohort system worked at the time that it was at the inception of the Leadership Academy. Originally, Leadership Academy was meant to serve lowest performing schools. We partnered them with the chief Right. Chief turnaround officer at the Department of Education.
Right.
And so that mandate really shifted as those schools weren't continued to be supported in the same ways that they were. We then partnered with the Department of Education and the school improvement team to more broadly serve, not just that lowest 5%, but other schools who were also low performing, struggling to make gains. And so as we did that, it made sense to have those broader cohorts. Again, because of duplicity in multiple different places, most RESAs have aspiring principal programs. They have new principal programs. So do things like LISI have district guided systems like that. So over time in that evolution, where we felt the greatest need was then to shift to this district model, really focus in and work on a team within a district to have very consolidated goals, very consolidated actions around those goals so that that district could then grow itself versus this external piece that we felt like they were getting other places. So that's kind of the evolution to the district model.
Sure. So much. It's very helpful. And please don't take my next comment with that I'm implying anything whatsoever, but when I see the largest, so to speak, vertical on your org chart and you indicate you're working with 6 districts, feel compelled to ask, wait a minute, we have 8 to 10 people working, quote, only with 6 districts, and you know what I mean?
We felt compelled to ask that as well.
That's right. So, and that, you know, just. We are sunsetting, actually,
Okay.
this program, because there is duplicity again with other programs, even at the district level. So where we did have a great need to service sometimes 150 cohort members at a time when we did need those differentiated coaches. And what you'll see also is in this coaching group, we had everything from former superintendents all the way down to instructional coach types of coaching, so that when we had those multiple tiers, that new principal system would be coached by former principals and former superintendents. So that was very directed to that particular cohort.
Absolutely.
And so we needed that level of differentiation in the coaches. And now some by attrition, some just by nature of sunsetting the program, this will not be in place in GOSA after this year.
Again, I'm not here to nitpick on your org chart or anything, but I
Nope.
hope
great
you understand my line of questioning.
It's great.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Well, and again, not to get ahead of where any allocated funds will be or won't be used in the future. We are in conversations with the governor's office about how to best, move forward with this position or these positions in our org chart. So that is under review. That takes me to literacy, and in a moment back to Stacy with some additional information, but this scope of work comes out of some work with House Bill 307 and comes out of some generous allotments for the work that I think as an entire state for the very first time in my career, and I was an English teacher and then an elementary principal, I feel like we have turned the arrows in the direction of supporting literacy across the state. And we're talking about it, we're aware of it, and I think that has been important and vital and really, really nice to watch from a former teacher's perspective. We have 3 positions that work with Stacy. Stacy reports directly to me. We also have a state literacy coach position, which is currently vacant, that we are planning to post. And then we have a project coordinator who does a lot of work as well. And so for the remainder of the questions, the scope of those answers you'll find in the handouts that Stacy shared with you, and I'll let her talk through and address any questions, as well as Jackie, that you may have regarding GOSA's literacy-focused budget.
All right, so the first question that you had relative to the monies relative to the literacy work are the expenditures for the Deal Center. And what we have in place right now are 2 independent contracts with the Deal Center, one that was funded through FY25 funds, and that's for about $250,000. That is the scope of work that you see on the front of the packet. You see a chart that has 3 phases of deliverables. Again, that contract was put in place with FY25 funds. So that first phase of deliverables has already occurred. They are in the process of invoicing us now. And what you see in those second phases are an adapted approach to literacy plan development and support, which is what this contract was originally initiated to do. We have restructured and reorganized functionally how the plan is being developed and in interactional terms with whom it's being developed. And so the role of the Deal Center has changed somewhat since that initial contract was put in place. So we have worked diligently over the last month to create this new scope of work that is different from the original, but it requires the Deal Center to be more interactional with the working groups in particular, because those working groups are going to feed in differently to the overall state literacy plan, which focuses on every child a reader, every community supported, and every educator prepared. So as they work with those different groups and we start the new phase of implementation, that plan development is going to shift, but we needed it to shift more quickly so that we can present that to the council this in November for the approval of that plan. So again, I'd let you just kind of glance through that scope of work and see if you have any questions. Okay. Sure. So one of the questions was also related to metrics and how we are evaluating the work of the Deal Center. I am working collaboratively literally on a weekly basis with Lindy Morgan, who is the executive director, and Paige Pullen, who is the senior advisor to the Deal Center relative to literacy, coaching, and work. So that piece is in place. What we have with the Deal Center contract, both this one and the one that I'm going to speak to in just a minute, are not necessarily tangibly evaluatable things like we can't say this metric was 100% effective because it was an implementation piece. We are really working on developmental pieces. And so the quality of that work is really evaluated based on the interactional pieces with our working groups, with the leadership of the council, with our ability to produce a quality product, which we think we have with the literacy plan. We're very excited about not only the interaction with our traditional partners, but that it's a very ambitious plan. We're looking at a way to, from birth really all the way to the grave, look at literacy and access to literacy, whether that's in the birth to 5 space, which is really kind of unheard of for a state literacy plan, which tends to focus on that K-12 space, because that's obviously where we have the most impact and influence. But we're engaging with organizations like the Department of Public Health. We're engaging them with DECAL so that we have that seamless transition with things like developmental screeners for not only vision and hearing, but also that oral language development early on, which is critical when we talk about research, when we talk about plan support for an organization like the Deal Center to be front and center with that plan development. So that's really that first piece of plan development. And so I'm going to pause and then I'm going to jump into the second contract. Okay. So the second contract deals specifically with a legislative appropriation, and that appropriation was for roughly $2 million, just a little over $2 million. Currently, about half of that has been encumbered for the first scope of work, which are the first 3 objectives that you see outlined in that second piece. One of the things that is necessary in the state of Georgia, based on the investment that this group has had with literacy coaches, is that we find a way not only to systematize how a person becomes a literacy coach, how we evaluate the effectiveness of that coaching, but also how we build a system so that people can become effective literacy coaches. We know that the most effective way to change student achievement in the classroom is to have more effective teachers. We get more effective teachers when we have coaches in the classroom to help bridge from knowledge to practice. So in order to do that and to be able to say we're doing that effectively, we have to establish a common set of competencies for literacy coaches. Just because I'm a good literacy teacher does not necessarily mean I will become a good literacy coach. So we have a lot of times people who have been excellent classroom teachers who want to move into literacy coaching. They need some support in that coaching realm. How do I provide appropriate feedback to teachers? How do I model in classrooms? How do I do the things that are going to improve that practice? In order for that to happen, we have to have a systematic way to evaluate the effectiveness of those coaches and a way to certify across the state that means the same thing. So we have an investment of about $18.5 million in state-funded literacy coaches. The first part of this work, and what you'll see in Objective 1, is a landscape analysis to determine things like this. Of these 164 coaches that we are funding with state dollars, what is the consistency of their backgrounds, experiences, qualifications, certifications, trainings, endorsements, all the things that feed into their experiential level? That feeds into the ability and the need to know, or the lack of ability, but need to know what it looks like at the district and school level. Because across the state, we have common job descriptions, common expectations for those state-funded coaches, but we know that there are districts who are struggling to have funded coaches in the district because that's a more effective use of that local money to have a job-embedded, school-embedded coach. We can't fund that at the state level. If we talk about 164 coaches for $18 million, you multiply that out to every school in the state, that's really that's unmanageable. So how do we build capacity at the district level? Well, in order to do that, we have to be able to evaluate the effectiveness of those coaches in role. Part of what we're doing then with this next phase for landscape analysis, then into this competency development. So we have lots of endorsements in the state of Georgia that speak to this. We actually have 4. We have a dyslexia endorsement, we have a reading endorsement, we have a straight coaching endorsement, and we have a teacher coaching support endorsement. Some of our state level coaches have all 4. And so as we think about specifically literacy coaching competencies, it can speak to and be spoken to from those 4 endorsements, but there's really not a thing that says, if I can do these things well, I'm going to be an effective literacy coach. So what we want to do is feed from these and create this set of competencies that says, these are the things we expect from a state level literacy coach. That means that we have to develop those competencies, some from these that we already have, but also from looking at other states to see how are they building these competencies. So we have a process for that, and the Deal Center is facilitating that process through the second objective. We've already started this literacy coach competency task force. We're tired of C's. We've got the LCCC, which is the Literacy Coach Competency Coordinating Committee. We've got the LCC, the Literacy Coach Coordinator, and now we've got the LCTC, the Literacy Coach Competency Task Force. TF. Okay, anyway, lots of C's and lots of T's. All of that to say, what we want to be able to build is a competency-based endorsement that honors the work of what we've already done, but also sets the standard for what does literacy coaching look like when it's effective across the state. So that's that second phase. The third phase is research and support for evaluation for these literacy coaching systems. The last thing that you have in the packet are some graphs, and this speaks to the other question about allocation of funds and what percentages, how those funds are being spent. 2 big questions that you asked. One of those questions is, of all of the monies that have been given to GOSA to oversee and support relative to literacy work, what portion of those funds go to administrative costs and really non-instructional pieces? So if you look at the total budget, you're looking at about $21 million. If you take out the $2 million that was earmarked for a research-based group, we know that that is exclusively going to be a research-based group. In this case, we've contracted with the Deal Center for half of that, and that's that second scope of work that you have. But if you look then at that $19 million, that's really the implementation part. You have several graphs. I want to point you first to the graph that says total funding for literacy initiative. So in the budget, if we talk about that $19 million, $18,480,000 is devoted exclusively to literacy coaches. The other 3 graphs that you have break down both of the state-funded coaching systems so that you can see independently and collectively what that means. But what you'll see is that the vast majority of funds are directly for coaching, in-school support, in-district support of literacy actions. So we are looking at a very, very, very small amount. In fact, the only place that you see any administrative costs are in the Literacy Council coordination and the overall expenditure. And then if you look at the combined Let's Read Georgia and Growing Readers expenditures, you're still at less than 1% of costs for administrative costs and oversight. All right, I think I've answered the questions, but I'll now take a break and let you ask some more.
Anybody have any questions before I jump in? Could we, and by the way, this is incredibly helpful.
Mhm.
And I'm certainly paying more attention to you than I am trying to read and digest this. So there may be questions
Sure.
that come out of your 17, 18 pages.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Forgive me and allow me to come back.
Reading for the afternoon.
This is much more likely to be a benefit to a legislator, right? When you show us two charts and give us three numbers. But no, in all sincerity, I do appreciate this. Could we talk about the universal screeners that have been talked about and discussed? And could you give just a brief 30-second, very high level of where we are with that, where we are in the process, what's been adopted, maybe what, I know you could stay for 30 minutes and talk, but in the interest of
30-second version. Yeah.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Gotcha. 30-second version is this. We have contracted with Amira. Amira has been reaching out to districts independently, but also via our friends at the Department of Education. Amy Denty and April Aldridge have been critical in the actual trying to recruit districts into that. Because of timing, we feel like not as many districts came on this year as will come on in the future. Right now, we have about 42% of students who are actually in testing with Amira. We expect that to grow next year. Again, that a lot of that was a timing issue, but we are in heavy recruitment of other districts trying to say, this is the option that will give us a more standardized look at screening across the state. One of the things that we are really looking at right now is to help districts understand what comes next with screening. Screening is the first step. Once we've screened, we get a flag. Right now, the percentages, and we're talking strictly of the 42% who are taking the Amira screener.
Right.
So we've got that initial data from BOI, beginning of year screen. About 11.4% of all students tested in that 42% screened for dyslexia. About 14% of all students of that 42% screened, flagged for significantly below grade level. Now, what does that mean? Are 11% of our kids dyslexic and 14% significantly below grade level? No, that's your initial flag. Once you get that flag, the next step is the diagnostic process to see what's creating that flag. What services are needed, what interventions are needed to remove that flag by middle of year and then end of year. Again, that screening process is a way to immediately understand who needs additional look, who needs additional diagnostic assessments, and how are we going to intervene for those kids. Is that 30 seconds?
Yeah. I think just talk about the budget and like you said,
Yeah, so we budgeted, or it was budgeted for the Amira contract for $1.9 million. Currently, only about 42% of that is going to be used because we only have 42% of our students actually taking that assessment this year. What we anticipate is that next year, that's going to go up significantly. In fact, we would love for every student in the state of Georgia to be screened with Amira so that we have a consistent way to look at those screening systems. But those additional funds will be there this year. But again, we hope those stay there because in order to serve all the students in the state, we would still need that 1.9 million allocation.
So just to be clear, let's use round numbers here. We gave you 2 million, you're going to be able to utilize half of it.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm assuming that there's not a plan, there's not an ability, I shouldn't say a plan, there's not the ability to go recruit any faster or harder than you are. And so generally speaking, you would expect that you'll use 1 million and won't be able to utilize the other million.
Not for that purpose, not for the explicit purpose of screeners. No, I will tell you that there have been many people who have suggested other ways that those funds might be used, and the council has taken those recommendations. And at this point, no recommendation has been made to use those additional funds, but they are there and people know it.
I understand. Yeah, trust me, I know how that works.
Yeah.
If I could, a follow-up, and I know in the interest of time, and I want to be fair to everyone who's here, to our friends in the audience and the members who are here. There's very few things that I came into this building that I thought I would ever say, that's a hill that I'm willing to die on, but literacy is one of them. I didn't know that was going to become a passion. I didn't know that was going to become a focus of our state tax dollars, of my tax dollars, and of the things that we prioritize. You've talked about a number of bills. I think everyone in this room who gets the ability to press a button has voted in support of literacy and literacy funding at every opportunity. The challenge, however, becomes when, and I'm not knocking, I'm not questioning. I do want to digest this. Plans are beautiful and they're great and they're necessary. But in my business, I joke all the time that people don't pay us because we're nice people. They pay us to get results. And I know that my peers ask me consistently, if we're going to continue spending tens of millions of dollars, what are we getting for our investment in literacy and what are the outcomes? And again, I'm not questioning this. I've admitted I have not digested this. Are there outcomes that are tangible, that are measurable, that are, I'll use the phrase, that are accurate and detailed enough for us to make additional appropriations decisions based on?
So I'm so glad you asked that question. Could I get a 3-minute answer to that one
Yes.
instead of a 30-second?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So one of the things that we are really proud of in the state is that we are taking a differentiated approach to literacy coaching, which is the bulk of that money that y'all have graciously appropriated for us. That $18 million funds about 164 state level coaches at the RESA level. There are 2 systems that work at the RESA level, one that works at the Department of Education, all of which fall under this literacy coach coordination work. Now, again, the deal center pieces that you had the scopes of work for, you asked very specific questions, but it's a really small part of this overall budget. Where we're really putting the money is in these coaches who are in schools working with teachers, and the ways that we're going to look at metrics for that are kind of diverse. The reason that we want to differentiate support is because we expect teachers to differentiate support in terms of education and instruction in the classroom. We know that we have schools and districts who don't need a lot of support. Think about Marietta City, who has a longevity of a plan with very specific metrics, very specific ways that they're measuring coaching support, but they're measuring it at the district level, 1 coach to 1 school ratio. It's much easier in a very closed environment to do that. One of the things that we want to be able to do, though, across the board for these coaches is say this. So DOE's coaches are federally funded. They serve CSI schools, and so they work on a 1 coach to 1 school basis.
Right.
It's really easy to look at metrics before and after relative to, is that coach having a direct impact on instruction in those classrooms? We do monitoring, we do observational pieces. Dr. Nick Philman does an excellent job supporting those coaches, and he can look and say, I know that when I see this behavior, it's coaching, this teacher behavior changes, and what I see in student outcomes, which is ultimately what we want to see, is a decrease in flagged students over the course of a year. One of the things that screeners give us the ability to do is look in year at growth, which is critical to understanding the impact of a teacher on these kids. Because if we look at cohort systems, we start to minimize our ability to look at what a teacher does with a child in a given year. So that's one way that we're going to look at metrics for that. And Nick's already gotten a lot of work from last year. Last year was the first year that they were in place. And he can look at decrease in flagged students over the course of that year and say, it seems that this coaching support is giving us what we want. We see fewer kids who are identified as significantly at risk for not achieving grade level. So that's our federal coaches, 1-to-1 CSI school. The RESA-based coaches operate much differently. You've got 2 models, one which is a support system that pairs specific professional development with specific coaching related to that professional development. So if I'm training a teacher or a coach on this, I expect to see this in the classroom. So when we say that through line, again, same thing that we just talked about with CSI schools. If I know what behaviors in instruction are going to lead to better student outcomes, and I see that change happening, we're not going to see student change immediately. But over time, when teachers become more consistently effective, you're going to see those student outcomes change. We can look in schools and say, in these systems with growing readers, we have some teachers who are supported and some who aren't, because that system works on a 1 coach to 24 teacher ratio. When that happens, we can say, hey, these teachers who were coached and supported had better student outcomes than these teachers who weren't coached and supported. So that's a metric that we want to look for with growing readers. A triage level of coaching, which is where we have the most coaches, 120 people, 116 funded positions, are with our Let's Read Georgia coaches. Those coaches work at the district and school level, depending on the size of the district. They provide support relative to what each district needs. So, for example, a Marietta City is not going to need a lot of coaching support from a Let's Read Georgia coach because they have in-district support systems for that work. Savannah Chatham's a perfect example. They have a beautiful literacy plan. They have funded internally more coaches than we can fund almost at the state level. They have spent more in terms of consistent support, training, and coaching for teachers in that district. We don't need to provide a whole lot of support to Savannah Chatham. But if I live in Taliaferro County and I teach in Taliaferro County, we don't have funds sufficient to have a full-time literacy coach on staff. So a Let's Read Georgia coach in that scenario might actually be in classrooms modeling for that teacher. But that's going to look vastly different from a coach who is assigned to Cobb County or Cherokee County. So it's differentiated based on RESA, based on the district needs within that RESA. And so again, that's kind of what I call the triage version, and that's that Let's Read Georgia coach system.
And then the overall metrics for literacy so that they can see the needle movement, like the decal, the caps, more students in caps.
So what Jackie's saying, you spoke to having a plan, but not like knowing what that plan's doing. So for every one of those, the pieces of every child a reader, every educator prepared, every community supported, we've got those metrics built in. So for example, if we want to look separate from coaching, we want to look at birth to 5. In our birth to 5 space, one of the metrics that DECAL wants us to use is the number of children who are served in a quality rated center, right? So the more children we serve in those quality rated centers, theoretically, the better prepared those children are going to be to enter kindergarten. So as we look down, we're looking at metrics as specific as that to that birth to 5 space through our literacy coaches impacting this school and this district in that space we were just talking about, even to adult and workplace literacy. Are we having an increase in workplace providers for workplace literacy? So how are we developing literacy skills of our adults who may have come to the workplace without those skills that they need? So, and I'm happy to send to you the plan as it currently exists so that you can see all those lovely metrics. But if you have questions about that, I'll answer those too.
No, I think you've certainly addressed my questions, and I greatly appreciate that. I do think, as with any program, as Sarah talked about, anything from school nutrition to literacy to capital outlay that we're talking about, it's understanding the impact and having specific metrics. I'm not questioning anything you're saying, but also know that my peers will ask, yeah, I heard all that, but we're spending $25 million a year. What are literacy rates doing? How are we defining that communities are served and supported? Yeah, so I think if there are specific metrics, that is data that this committee needs to see, and it's something that needs to be shared, that we need to be able to share with the broader Appropriations Committee and the 236 members of the General Assembly.
I have just the thing for you.
I love it. I love it. With that, Representative Alexander, you've been quiet before we close today. Any questions that you may have? So they're speaking your language. I love it. Chairman Dickey, anything before we wrap up for you today? So Leader Wade, anything from?
Well, apologies for missing part of your presentation. I was dealing with a trifecta of pharmacy, doctor, and school. So I had to parent.
We don't have to parent for a minute. Hearing no other questions, thank you all so much for being here. And to that, we will give you 19 and a half minutes of your days back. Thank you all so much for being here. Safe travels to your next destination. And until next time, we'll stand adjourned.